Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. The trip wasn't supposed to change anything. A simple fishing getaway with my uncle up in Huntsville, just like we did every year when the summer heat gave way to the cool breath of fall. 3 days of nothing but water, quiet woods, and swapping old stories over black coffee by the lake. I kissed Tara goodbye on the porch Thursday morning, told her I'd be back Sunday night. She hugged me a little tighter than usual, said, "Be safe, and don't let Uncle Randy talk you into catching more than you can clean." I laughed, thinking nothing of it. Just Tara being Tara, or so I thought. When I rolled back into town late Sunday, the house didn't feel right. It wasn't anything big. No broken windows or kicked-in doors. Just different. The porch light wasn't on, and Tara always left it burning for me. The living room smelled like cinnamon, stronger than usual, like someone had tried too hard to make the place feel homey. The couch cushions were fluffed too perfectly, and the coffee table, usually cluttered with hymnals, bulletins, and Tara's half-finished knitting, was spotless, clean in a way that felt deliberate. She came down the stairs wearing that old choir sweater I always teased her about, smiled, and said, "I thought you were coming back tomorrow." I raised an eyebrow. "Tomorrow?" I said Sunday. She paused just a second too long. "Oh, must have mixed it up. Sorry, honey." She kissed my cheek and moved on like she hadn't just fumbled. I didn't push it right then, chalked it up to fatigue, but that knot in my stomach didn't untangle. Over the next few days, the oddities piled up. Tara, who usually begged to skip Wednesday night rehearsals, was suddenly excited about choir practice. Couldn't stop humming hymns around the house like she was living inside the church hymnal. At first, I thought maybe she was just trying to reconnect with the church. Lord knows I'd prayed for her to find her spark again. But then I started noticing smaller things. The laundry didn't match up. Dresses I hadn't seen her wear in months were now hanging in the laundry room, freshly pressed. She kept slipping out after supper with excuses like, "I need to drop off flowers at the sanctuary," or "the girls are staying late to help Ben rearrange the sheet music." Ben, the new church pianist. I'd only met him once. Young, soft-spoken, fresh out of college. Nothing seemed off at first, but I knew better than to ignore instincts. Especially when Tara started mentioning his name a little too often. Ben said this. Ben plays like this. It wasn't much on its own, but stacked against everything else, it started smelling like a lie dressed in Sunday best. By Friday, I found myself walking past the church just after supper. The sanctuary lights were on. Nothing unusual about that. But as I lingered at the edge of the parking lot, I caught sight of Tara slipping through the side door, glancing over her shoulder like she was checking for shadows. Choir practice? Maybe. Maybe not. At home, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe she really was just pouring herself into church to make up for lost time. After all, we'd both drifted a bit, hadn't we? Yet, as I lay awake that night, listening to Tara softly snore beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something sacred between us had been quietly rewritten. The next day, as I sat on the back porch sipping coffee, I decided I wasn't about to go poking around just yet. If there was something to find, it'd show itself soon enough. I just needed to watch and wait. But deep down, I already knew. Tuesday rolled around quieter than usual. Tara was up before me, humming softly in the kitchen while frying bacon, as if our house hadn't been thick with tension for days. She laid breakfast out neatly, complete with my favorite blackberry preserves, trying too hard to make things feel normal. I sat across from her, watching every move. She kept talking about the upcoming church service, the choir's new songs, and how Ben had such a gift for arrangement, dropping his name more times than necessary. I didn't interrupt. I just let her talk, let her spin her little story like everything was perfect. Later that afternoon, while Tara was at another extended choir meeting, I walked past her craft room looking for a spare tape measure. That's when I spotted it. A small velvet box tucked beneath a pile of hymn sheets. It wasn't hidden well, just enough to make it seem accidental. I pulled it out, opened it, and inside was a sterling silver tie clip engraved with the initials BL. Not Ethan. Not mine. B was for Ben. My blood ran cold. I closed the box carefully, took a steady breath, and stared at it for a long moment. I could have confronted her right then. Could have stormed into choir practice and made a scene. But the part of me that had spent years keeping this marriage stitched together said, no, not yet. So instead, I came up with something better. That evening, while Tara was showering, I took the tie clip out to the barn and carefully scratched the back, leaving faint but noticeable marks. Nothing that ruined it outright, but enough that when Ben would clip it to his Sunday suit, he'd see it wasn't pristine. I placed it right back where I found it, untouched otherwise. At dinner, Tara didn't suspect a thing. She served stew like always, chatted about how busy practice had been, how Ben was still getting used to the church family, and how much he appreciated everyone's kindness. I nodded along, pretending to care. Every word she said felt like watching a play where I already knew the ending. I started watching her more closely after that. Thursday, she left for choir setup half an hour earlier than usual. Friday, she stayed out after dark helping Ben with sheet music. I knew exactly where she was, but I didn't flinch. I didn't even hint that I knew. Sunday came, and I waited with quiet patience as Tara dressed for church, fussing over her hair and humming while she got ready. I watched her slip the tie clip gift in her purse like it was just another offering to be blessed. On the drive over, she went on and on about the sermon topic, never once noticing how still I was in the driver's seat. After service, I spotted Ben by the piano, straightening his suit. Sure enough, he slipped that engraved tie clip onto his collar, then hesitated when he saw the scratches. His brows knit, but he quickly smoothed his expression, probably thinking it was just a factory defect. Tara watched him from across the sanctuary, smiling softly to herself like she'd just pulled off the greatest secret in town. But I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction. Not yet. The dance wasn't over. It was just getting started. The following week, I found myself tangled in my own thoughts more than once. I knew something wasn't right, but I also knew how easy it was to get it wrong. I'd seen good men ruin their marriages by jumping at shadows, and if there was even a chance I was misreading this, I didn't want to be another cautionary tale whispered about over potlucks and quilting circles. Still, the tie clip, the late nights, the strange hush that had settled over Tara lately, it all kept gnawing at me. On Wednesday night, I decided to stop second-guessing and follow her. She left for choir practice early, claiming the new song arrangements were giving everyone fits. I waited a good 20 minutes before pulling on my boots and heading out. I circled the church carefully, parking where no one would spot me, and slipped into the side vestibule. The sanctuary was dim, save for a few spotlights on the choir loft. Sure enough, Tara stood beside someone near the piano. My stomach sank. Was it Ben? Were they meeting privately again? As I eased closer, hiding behind the half wall near the coat rack, I could finally make out the other person. It wasn't Ben. It was Meredith, one of the older altos from the choir, struggling with a stack of sheet music. Tara was just helping her organize and rehearse, nothing more. Their conversation was dry, focused on hymns and chord progressions. Nothing about it hinted at anything beyond the usual church routine. I stood frozen for a long time, feeling both foolish and relieved. Maybe I'd let suspicion blind me. Maybe the tie clip was just some church fundraiser gift I hadn't heard about, and maybe the late nights were really just a committed wife helping out. I stayed there watching, trying to force myself to believe that this was all I'd see, but the seed of doubt wouldn't quite let go. Later that night at home, I tried to test the waters. Long night. I asked as she came through the door. She tossed her coat over the chair and smiled. Yeah, Meredith was struggling. We had to go over everything twice. I nodded, searching her face for cracks. None showed. You could have called, I said gently. I was starting to think y'all ran off to Montgomery for sheet music. She laughed, casual and smooth. Maybe next week, she joked. Her reaction should have calmed me, but instead it unsettled me more. It was too smooth, too perfect. Over the next few days, I convinced myself to let it go. I even apologized, subtly, for acting distracted lately. I think I've just been tired from the trip, I said. Didn't mean to seem distant. Tara smiled, kissed my cheek, and reassured me everything was fine. For a fleeting moment, I almost believed it. But then Saturday came. I swung by the church mid-afternoon to drop off some donated lumber for the fall festival stage. As I passed by the small office behind the choir loft, I caught sight of Tara through the half-closed door. She wasn't with Meredith this time. She was laughing softly, sitting a little too close to Ben, their heads nearly touching as they leaned over a hymnal. My chest tightened. I ducked back before they could see me. This wasn't about helping with choir sheets anymore. That closeness wasn't rehearsed. I left without saying a word. No confrontation. No storming in. Just quiet confirmation. Whatever I thought I'd seen before. I wasn't wrong after all. Sunday came dressed like any other. The crisp fall air carried the smell of fresh bread and wood smoke as I walked into church alongside Tara, her hand casually tucked into the crook of my arm, as if nothing was brewing under the surface. But I wasn't walking in as the trusting husband anymore. I was walking in as someone who knew, someone who had already started planning. Tara's voice floated through the small talk like it always did, greeting Mrs. Klein with a compliment about her floral dress, making note of the new hymnals Brother Martin had finally ordered, and throwing out a passing mention of Ben's extra time and dedication this past week. My jaw tightened, but I nodded like I hadn't just seen her sitting far too close to him the day before. During the service, I sat quietly, eyes drifting between the pulpit and the choir loft where Tara sang beside Ben, stealing glances at him between verses. It wasn't obvious to anyone else, but I'd learned to see it now. The way her eyes lingered a second longer than needed, the subtle shift of her body toward him when they laughed. I wasn't looking for clues anymore. I was counting them. After the service, Tara pulled me aside before I could step out the door. "Hey, Ethan," she said softly, brushing imaginary dust off my jacket. "Ben asked if I could help him lock up tonight after evening choir. He's still getting used to the building." She smiled like it was nothing. "Mind if I stay late?" I stared down at her. "No, I don't mind," I said without hesitation. I didn't even blink. "You help him all you want." Her relief was almost too eager. "You're the best," she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek before heading off to gather her things. But she didn't know that before church even started, I had already spoken with Samantha and Grace, two old friends who'd grown up singing beside us in the choir, who had seen enough from the sidelines to share my suspicion. I hadn't even had to convince them. One word, Ben, and they both stiffened. "Thought we were the only ones noticing," Grace said. "It's been going on longer than you think," Samantha added, her voice flat. I didn't show it then, but hearing that confirmed what I feared. This wasn't a momentary mistake. This was a pattern. That evening, instead of sitting home like Tara expected, I parked behind the old maintenance shed next to the church, out of sight. The sanctuary was dark, except for the soft glow spilling from the choir loft. I didn't need to sneak far. From the back of the building, I could hear their voices echoing off the old wood rafters. At first, it was laughter, Ben telling some joke about Sister Ellie's infamous cornbread. Then came Tara's voice, softer, closer. "I just can't believe he hasn't noticed. He trusts me too much." My stomach turned. Ben's reply was quieter, but just as damning. "Let's hope he stays that way. At least through Christmas." More laughter, more murmurs. Then the sound of the organ bench scraping slightly as one of them sat down. I stepped back, heart pounding, not from heartbreak, but from the absolute certainty that I had them. I could have walked in right then, could have thrown open the door and watched their faces melt in real time. But I didn't. Not yet. I had learned patience. Let them dig deeper. Let them think they were still hidden. The deeper the betrayal, the sharper the justice. I walked back to my truck under the glow of the steeple light, calm and composed, because now I didn't just suspect. I knew. And knowing? That was power. The next few days passed like I was walking through a dream where everyone else was moving normal, but I was already 2 steps ahead. Tara went about her usual business, fixing meals, humming hymns while sweeping the front porch, chatting with the ladies on the phone about the fall church social like she wasn't already living a double life. She didn't know. I had heard it all. The whispered laughter with Ben, the mockery of my trust. It all played on repeat in my head every time she opened her mouth about the busy choir schedule. I let her keep talking. I let her keep pretending. But while she was humming and baking, I was planning. I wasn't interested in throwing a tantrum or storming into choir practice to drag them both into the street. No, I wanted it to sink deep, to stain them long after the thrill wore off. And I knew exactly how. On Wednesday, I stopped by Samantha's place under the pretense of returning a borrowed hymnal. She let me in without question. "It's worse than you think," she said, handing me coffee before I could even ask. Ben's been bragging about it to a few of the other musicians. Real quiet, but it's getting around. Grace joined us shortly after, equally disgusted. He's not even discreet. I heard him on the phone outside the fellowship hall, talking about T's late-night visits. He wasn't talking about sheet music, Ethan. Their words didn't hurt. They focused me. It wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown affair, one that made me the punchline of a joke I wasn't even supposed to hear. That night, when Tara came home, late smelling faintly of cheap motel soap, I played the part. Long practice? I asked, pouring her a glass of sweet tea like nothing was wrong. Oh yeah, she said, exhausted. Ben's got everyone working double time for the Christmas cantata. She didn't even blink. I almost admired the performance. Thursday morning, I found her old songbook tucked beneath some sheet music on her nightstand. Inside was a hotel key card, the kind from a hillcrest and off Route 31, the one with the flickering neon sign we passed every Sunday on the way to church. I held it for a while, thumb brushing over the cheap plastic, wondering if she even cared enough to hide it better. Apparently not. I slid the key back exactly where I found it. Friday, I spent the day getting the cabin ready. It sat quiet on the edge of Carter's Lake, just far enough from town to be private, but close enough for people to notice if they needed to. It hadn't seen much use since Dad passed, but the fireplace still worked, and the deck still overlooked the water like nothing had changed. By sundown, Samantha and Grace were sitting on the porch with me, sipping coffee and listening as I laid it all out. "You sure about this?" Samantha asked. "Dead sure," I said. "I'm not just catching them. I'm showing them." Saturday rolled in quiet. Tara flitted around the house early, ironing her dress, planning the post-service dinner, fussing over every little thing. "Ethan," she said sweetly, "don't forget about tonight's choir potluck. I'll probably be late, so you might have to start without me." I nodded, playing the fool one more time. "Of course, darling," I said, kissing her forehead. "You just enjoy yourself." She left without suspecting a thing. I stood on the porch, watching her drive away, knowing full well I wouldn't be the one waiting for her after practice. Because this time I wasn't coming home. Not to her. And tomorrow? The whole church would know exactly why. Saturday night, as the choir potluck buzzed on without me, I was miles away at the cabin, fire crackling in the hearth, coffee brewing slow, and Samantha and Grace seated on the worn leather couch like they'd done 100 times when we were kids. The place hadn't changed much since my father built it. Solid beams, creaky floors, the smell of pine and smoke soaked into every board. The only thing different was the purpose. We weren't just there for old times' sake. We were there to take back what was stolen. We spent the evening talking through every detail. Grace had quietly confirmed through another choir member that Tara and Ben had been slipping off after choir practice for weeks. Samantha, sharper than most gave her credit for, had already spotted them sneaking into Ben's car last Tuesday under the guise of grabbing hymnals. What neither of them knew was that I had the key card, the scratch tie clip, and the confirmation of their laughter echoing off the church rafters like ghosts. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was watching a story I'd already read to the last page. "I still can't believe she'd be this reckless," Grace said, shaking her head as she sipped her coffee. Samantha smirked bitterly. "She ain't reckless, she's arrogant. Always thought she was smarter than the rest of us." I nodded, staring into the fire. "And tomorrow," I said calmly, "she's going to learn she's not." The next morning, I woke up early, loaded the truck, and drove into town without a hint of hesitation. The cabin had done more than give me distance. It reminded me who I was before all this mess. By the time I pulled up to the church, the parking lot was already filling. Tara's car was there, parked neat like always. I spotted her inside, flitting around like the perfect pastor's wife, greeting folks with that soft smile like nothing was about to unravel. What Tara didn't see was me slipping into the fellowship hall with Samantha and Grace on either arm, dressed sharper than I had in months. We didn't sneak. We walked in proud, making sure every eye caught it. I saw heads turn, whispers ripple through the pews. The sight of me with those two was enough to spark every gossip tongue in the county. We took Tara's usual pew. Front row, dead center. Tara walked in moments later, sheet music in hand, and froze. She spotted us instantly. The blood drained from her face so fast, I thought she might faint. Ben, trailing behind her like a clueless puppy, barely registered what was happening until Tara's grip on his arm tightened. I didn't look away. I didn't blink. I just leaned back, arm resting behind Samantha, who gave me a subtle, knowing nod. Grace sat on my other side, calm as a cat in the sun. The service dragged on, but Tara barely kept it together, stumbling through hymns, voice cracking on notes she'd sung flawlessly for years. Ben avoided eye contact with everyone, sweat visibly pooling at his collar. I almost pitied him. Almost. After the closing prayer, as folks gathered for coffee hour, Tara cornered me behind the sanctuary, eyes wide and desperate. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Have you lost your mind?" I smiled calmly. "Since you took up music," I said, just loud enough for Grace and Samantha to hear, "I figured I'd try harmony." The color drained from her face completely. Ben stood awkwardly behind her, pretending to check his phone, but he wasn't fooling anyone. Folks started piecing it together right there. You could see it in their faces, and I didn't even need to raise my voice. I left Tara standing there, speechless, humiliated, watching as I walked out of that church with two women who had more grace and loyalty in their pinky fingers than she'd shown me in months. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cause a scene. I just walked out smiling. The next week in town was nothing short of a storm, though you wouldn't have known it by looking at me. I carried on like normal, tending to the cattle, patching fences, and visiting the co-op like it was just another week. But inside the church walls, inside the small talk at the diner, and across every porch swing in town, the story was already spreading like wildfire. Folks didn't even bother lowering their voices. "Did you see Ethan last Sunday? With Samantha and Grace?" And Tara. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. They didn't need the full details. Small towns are built to fill in blanks. I made no effort to explain myself. I didn't need to. My silence did the talking. Every time I walked into the general store or passed someone on the street, I got nods of approval, subtle smirks, and the kind of looks you give someone who just did what half the town had wished they could. Meanwhile, Tara disappeared like mist. I didn't see her once in town, and even Ben stopped showing up for midweek practices. Samantha mentioned that the choir was scrambling without them. Couldn't carry a tune with a bucket these days, she joked as we stacked hay bales behind the cabin later that week. What surprised me most was how natural things felt with Samantha and Grace. We didn't rehearse it or force it. The three of us simply fell back into rhythm, like no time had passed since the days we'd all camped out here as kids, roasting marshmallows and daring each other to swim in Carter's freezing lake. Now there was something steadier, stronger, something that wasn't about payback anymore. It was about clearing the wreckage and finally breathing again. By Friday, I heard from Brother Martin that Tara had taken some time away to visit family out in Birmingham. I nodded, thanked him for the update, and moved on. Not because I didn't care, but because I truly didn't. Whatever guilt or hope she thought I'd wrestle with never showed up. She could have gone to the next town over or the next state. Didn't make a lick of difference to me anymore. That night, the three of us were back at the cabin. Grace brought fresh biscuits, Samantha brewed strong coffee, and we sat around the fire like we'd done 100 times before. "You doing all right?" Samantha asked, eyes searching mine. I leaned back, watching the flames dance. "Better than all right," I said. "Feels like I'm finally home again." Grace chuckled. "Town's buzzing about you. Think you're the first man to pull off a quiet storm without lifting a finger." I shrugged. Didn't have to lift one. They did it themselves. They both laughed, and for the first time in a long while, I joined them without forcing it. No bitterness, no lingering anger, just peace. Later that night, after they'd gone, I stood on the porch staring out at the moonlit fields. No knot on my stomach, no weight on my shoulders. Just me, the land, and the steady hum of cicadas. Tara might have expected a war, but all I gave her was silence. And that, I knew, would echo louder than anything I could have said. It was the following Saturday when Tara finally crawled out from whatever hole she'd been hiding in. I was loading the truck with feed when I spotted her old blue sedan creeping up the driveway like it didn't belong there anymore. She stepped out slowly, arms crossed, her usual confidence deflated but not entirely gone. The first thing I noticed was how hard she was working to mask the desperation. Her posture said pride, but her eyes betrayed her. She was scared, and not just of me, but of what the town was whispering behind closed doors. "Ethan," she called out, voice too soft for the wind. I didn't respond right away. Just finished strapping down the feed, taking my time, letting her stew in the quiet. She tried again, walking closer. "Ethan, please." I finally turned, leaning casually against the truck bed. "What do you want, Tara?" I asked, flat as a board. She fidgeted with the strap of her purse like it might hold the words she couldn't find. I just want to talk. About us." I gave a half chuckle. "Us," I repeated. That's a bold word after everything. Her eyes darted to the ground, then back up to me. "I know what you think you saw, but it wasn't." I cut her off with a raised hand. "Don't lie. Not now. Not after I heard you loud and clear on that mic. Not after I saw you sneak off with Ben week after week like it was part of the liturgy." Tears welled up, but they didn't move me. "Not this time. It wasn't supposed to go that far," she whispered. "It just happened." I straightened up. "You think I care how it happened? The fact is, you made it happen. Every hymn you sang, every hand you shook on Sunday mornings, you were thinking about how you'd slip out the back door when no one was watching." Her lip quivered. "Ethan, please. I'm sorry. I'll fix it. I can fix it. I'll step down from the choir. I'll quit seeing Ben. I'll make it right." I crossed my arms. "You think stepping down will fix this? You think crying on my porch is enough? You spent months turning me into a fool, Tara, in front of the whole town, and now that they know, you're worried about saving face." Her voice cracked. "I'm worried about us." I leaned in just enough for her to flinch. "There is no us. There's you, and there's me, and I've never felt clearer about where I stand." She staggered back a step, eyes wide, trembling. "You just want to throw it all away?" She choked. "Everything we built?" I kept my voice steady. "You tore it down. I'm just sweeping up the pieces." Her composure snapped. "Ethan, please," she shouted, arms flailing. "You don't understand. Ben doesn't even matter. It was stupid. I made a mistake. We can fix this if you just stop acting like you're some saint." I didn't even blink. "No fixing, Tara. You can pack your things. You can cry to whoever still wants to hear it. But you don't get to stand here and pretend you're the victim." She stood there shaking, breathing like she'd sprinted the whole way from town. When she realized I wasn't going to budge, she turned and stormed to her car. The tires spit gravel as she peeled out, disappearing down the dirt road. I didn't follow. I didn't call after her. I just went back to work, steady and calm, like the ghost of her had never even driven up. And it felt good. It felt right. The weeks that followed felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. The house was quieter without Tara, but not empty, peaceful. The clatter of pots, the old clock ticking above the fireplace, even the creak of the porch swing at night, felt like they belonged to me again. I didn't realize how much space she'd taken up until it was gone. I found myself getting up early, not out of obligation but choice. The farm didn't just feel like work anymore, it felt like purpose. I started patching things I'd ignored for too long, like the leaning fence by the creek and the broken gate out near the east pasture. It wasn't about keeping busy, it was about reclaiming what was mine. Samantha and Grace didn't disappear after that Sunday, either. If anything, they settled back into my life naturally, like they had never left it. Grace would swing by with fresh bread or a basket of apples from her orchard, and Samantha often found excuses to help mend the old hymnals in the small study I'd barely used since my father passed. We never made it about Tara. They didn't ask, and I didn't offer. The silence was its own comfort. Folks in town were quick to take sides, but surprisingly, most didn't go where Tara might have hoped. Old men who'd never said more than a polite howdy now tipped their hats with respect. The women at the church quilting circle gave me soft, knowing looks when I passed by the fellowship hall. Even Brother Martin, without saying a word, gave me a firm handshake after service one Sunday, holding it just long enough to make sure I understood he knew. I didn't need their pity. I just needed the quiet. And they gave me that. One evening, sitting on the porch with Samantha and Grace after a long day of work, Grace chuckled softly. "You look different," she said. "Lighter." I raised an eyebrow. "That's so." Samantha nodded. "She's right. You're not carrying it anymore." I knew what they meant. It wasn't about Tara. It was about everything. I wasn't dragging chains around behind me, trying to keep something alive that was already rotten. The three of us sat there under the fading orange glow of the setting sun, sipping sweet tea like we were the last ones in the world who remembered how to be still. I wasn't looking for anything beyond that moment. Not revenge, not pity, not even redemption. Just the quiet. A few days later, while walking through town, I passed by the church bulletin board and spotted the announcement. Ben and Tara have stepped down from their choir roles indefinitely. No fanfare, no explanation, just a quiet resignation. I stood there for a moment, then kept walking. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. It just felt like confirmation. Later that week, Samantha and Grace helped me organize the old cabin into something that felt more like a second home than a relic. We cleared out dust, patched up the fireplace, and even found some of my father's old carvings tucked away in a trunk. As we worked, I realized I wasn't rebuilding anything for show. I wasn't proving a point. I was simply living again. The night we finished, sitting on that same creaky porch, Samantha leaned her head against my shoulder. Grace was already dozing off in the rocking chair. The stars stretched out wide above us, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for the next storm. I was already past it, and I had no intention of ever looking back. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.